Hello and welcome to the Elephant Lounge. I'm your host Tuesday. I want to thank you for joining me, and we are back with Leaving Neverland once again, and I want to address some of the things that fans have been saying about Wade and James, and I want to kind of address that. Now, some of these points I have made before. Some of them do need some repeating. So we'll start off with the complaint of the documentary's one-sided. This is still a complaint that is going on and on. The documentary was about Wade and James. It was about grooming. It was about why they protected their abuser and why it took so long for them to come forward. As victims of child sexual abuse often do, they struggle with accepting that what has happened to them was abuse. And so they rationalize it thinking that it was okay, it's something that they went along with, it's something that they may have enjoyed at the time, believing that the bond between them and the man they adored or worshipped, believing that that bond was genuine and loving. And as they get older, they may still want to have a relationship with their abuser, and they will want to protect any of that. They don't want to admit to the world that someone that they admire did something horrible to them. That's what this documentary is about. Yes, it involves Michael Jackson, but what exactly is the other side here? That Jackson didn't do anything wrong? We already know this. He's already said, I'm innocent. 30 years we've had the side of wacko told to the public. There's nothing more to say. The documentary, they did highlight a couple rabid fans that were found on YouTube, but as Dan Reed has eloquently stated, only two people knew for sure what occurred, whether it was Michael and James or Michael and Wade. The family claiming nothing happened means absolutely nothing, since they were not there. So these are their stories. I noticed Taj is trying to raise some money for another documentary to respond to Leaving Neverland, but interestingly enough, I wonder if that documentary is going to be fair and balanced. They did release some response that was on YouTube. I forget who did it. No one I ever heard of. There was nothing fair and balanced about that documentary. It was very, very one-sided. So what's the problem with one side? As long as you're aware that this is what it tells you, you're more than welcome to look at the other side. But can we please remember that authorities had always suspected that James and Wade were indeed abused? Can we at least remember that? They always knew. They just couldn't force them to come forward back then. You can't do that to a victim. Number two, their complaint is James' mother danced in 2009 when Wacko died, but James didn't realize it was abuse until 2014. James only told his mother Jackson was a bad man. This was back when he was asked to testify. He makes it clear that Jackson contacted his parents first and then contacted him. Clearly, she put two and two together and figured out something must have happened to her son, but she says she didn't push him for any details. Now, whether that's a good idea or not, I don't know. I'm not her. I think she feels enough guilt as it is. We can't choose our parents, folks. We just can't choose our parents. Just because this happened does not mean that James was able to truly understand exactly what happened with him. He was clearly not ready to deal with any of it since he told his mother to promise not to tell anyone. He didn't tell his wife. He didn't tell his friends. He didn't tell anyone in his family. It would not be until he saw Wade on television talking about his abuse. And James then realized he needed to do something about what happened. Another claim or complaint is this issue with the Grammys. So in Safe Chuck's statement to the court, he says he flew to New York in 1989 to see Jackson after he performed at the Grammys in February. But the Grammys were in LA during this year, not New York. So obviously this is a mistake. It could be a clerical mistake. It could be a mistake on his part. In 1988, the Grammys were were indeed held at Radio City Music Hall in New York City. Okay, so he's off a year. This is not a big deal. If you're somebody who is trying to piece together the events of your life from 30 years prior, you're going to have some memory issues. That's expected. One thing that I don't feel enough people understand is that when people are telling the truth and they're trying to piece together information, they're doing it the best they can. They're going to tell their story. It's going to have some inconsistencies. It's not going to match perfectly. Why? Because they're being honest. Liars, people who are lying, they know they're lying, so they will do everything they can to make sure that their story fits with everything else. So then they'll try to make everything as perfect as possible. A too perfect story can actually mean that a person is lying. If somebody has an answer for everything and everything fits perfectly and everything, no, that's somebody who's lying to you. There's other inconsistencies. We're going to get into that. But for now, we need to remember that somebody trying to remember 30 years ago, it's not going to be perfect. Most of these fans that are complaining about stuff like this, they couldn't tell me what they did March 4th of this year. Okay, they couldn't tell me what happened last month, but they somehow expect two victims who were children at the time of their abuse. They're supposed to recall every moment precisely, every date, every year, everything. Ridiculous. Number 4, Wade says he was with Michael before the trial, and this dinner that he attended convinced him that he should testify. However, Taj is claiming this dinner or whatever took place after the trial. And then there was another YouTuber who I shall not name, because I'm not trying to start crap with anybody, okay? I am not here for drama or anything like that. I'm just saying there's a certain YouTuber that has put out a lot of bad information. He has made the suggestion that during the documentary, Wade did say that Taj was at this dinner, but that the documentary makers cut this part out. It sounds a little bit conspiratorial to me. I don't know where he's getting that. I don't even know where to begin with this entire claim, because in order to believe Taj, you have to believe that Wade and his wife are lying about the entire incident. Okay, for what purpose? Why? If he was making up a story, it would be so much easier to just say, I was thinking about Michael and his children, and so I remembered, okay, maybe I really need to do this. He could have just said something vague and less specific, and he would have got his point across. No, instead, he has an entire story about how he went over there, how Michael Jackson wanted him to bring wine, and how he drank out of these plastic cups and all this other stuff. We're supposed to believe all of that's a lie? This is a he said thing, and who has the motive to lie here? Well, Taj. I mean, what does Taj do? Nothing. He gets money from the estate. He gets money from his family. He's trying to protect the legacy because, let's face it, he has the motivation, not Wade. There's no motivation for Wade to lie about something stupid like that. Okay, number 5. There are too many inconsistencies in their stories, so nothing should be believed. Well, so far, the inconsistencies that I have seen have been either flat out lies or misinterpretations of what someone else did, or maybe a jumble of a memory or something like that, which is common, extremely common among sexual abuse victims. There seem to be no efforts by supporters to give Wade or James the benefit of the doubt. The only thing they seem to be interested in is interpreting what they say in the most egregious way, while simultaneously performing mental contortions to find any and every excuse one could imagine in order to protect Michael Jackson. He slept in bed with boys. His own witnesses, Wade, Macaulay Culkin, and Brett Barnes, all stated at trial that they slept alone in bed with Michael Jackson. This is on record. It is fact. He wasn't sleeping on the floor during any of that time. Gavin slept alone in bed with Michael Jackson. Fans just seem to find an excuse for anything and everything he did, because the reality of the situation is too hard for them to accept. And that is the bottom line. And let's also remember that the court even at Gavin's trial, the court had talked about potential victims of Michael Jackson. People authorities believed were victims of Michael Jackson's abuse. And guess who's on that list? James Safechuck and Wade Robson. That's why Wade needed to testify at trial. The prosecution had already presented evidence that certain staff members had seen Michael Jackson and Wade in a compromising position. James Safechuck was on that list as well. That's why he needed him to testify. So if there's inconsistencies in their stories, or they don't remember a year, or they don't remember a location, that does not mean they're lying. That does not mean they were not abused at the hands of Michael Jackson. Now, I have mentioned some of these next ones before in podcast 2, so you can get some more details there. But the Thriller jacket, this is another lie by fans. I don't know what the deal is. James does say in his complaint that he received the Thriller jacket. He was allowed to keep it for a couple years, but Michael Jackson asked him to return it, and it needed to be in a museum, but that he would still own it. I don't know how. I think that was a lie on his part, but yes, he had to give the Thriller jacket back. They didn't cover that in the documentary. I don't know why. I don't know why it would need to be covered. That is what happened, and it's explained in James's complaint with the court. Another one I had already previously talked about is the Bullwhip from the movie, the Indiana Jones. Okay, Harrison Ford gave James a bullwhip, and this other YouTuber I was talking about earlier got really excited and started telling his fans that there was only one bullwhip. Well, the company that made the bullwhip said that they provided this big budget Hollywood film with 30 whips. Big budget Hollywood film is not going to need to rely on one bullwhip as a prop for all 3 movies. That's not going to happen. It's not even realistic, number 1. And number 2, yes, Harrison Ford gave one of those bullwhips to an auction that they could sell off, okay? It's such a stupid lie. I don't know why or where people get this stuff from. Euro Disney, talked about this one before as well. James said in his complaint he went to Disney World with Michael Jackson, which is in Florida. I happen to know that Disney World was there because that's around the time I had gone to Disney World. He never said anything about Euro Disney in the documentary. That never happened. I watched the dang thing 3 times just to try and figure out where the hell it was. It was not there. And on top of that, no, Euro Disney was not built at that time yet. And the other problem is, well, nobody ever made that claim. This is a figment of the fans' imagination. Okay, so this next one has to do with Geordi. And I have touched upon this before, but again, it needs to bear repeating because it's still something that keeps going and going and going. The drawing that Geordi made of Michael Jackson's penis absolutely did match. There is no other way to explain why his lawyers advised him to settle this case for over $20 million. That doesn't include the attorney's fees and anyone else he had to pay off. In conjunction with this lie is the idea that the insurance company pressured him to settle. Again, total lie. Now, I will post some things on my blog in conjunction with this podcast so that you can see for yourself. You can read the settlement yourself. There was no insurance company involved. There was a moment at which the insurance company made a one-time offer to Michael Jackson. Jackson refused this offer because they were still fighting and in negotiations. The insurance company had come out and said, no, we did not pay. And part of the reason why is the wording of the settlement. It's not just negligence. There's an admission of sexual relations with Jordan Chandler. You can read the settlement yourself. It's about 14 pages long. If you look at the signatures, this did not happen. Also, MJ Facts has, I will refer you to that blog as well because they have even more. They have a transcript of Tom Mesereau even admitting that no insurance company paid out. Okay, so there was no pressure by an insurance company to settle. Absolutely ridiculous. Again, the drawing, it matched. Authorities are on record saying it matched. Okay, I don't know what else more you want. I really don't know what else more that you want. the reason why the second trial with Gavin, the information, the drawing was not admitted to trial is because Jordan Chandler, he skipped out. I think he even left the country because he wanted nothing to do with any of this, and I don't blame him, but because he's not there to say, yes, this is my drawing and confirm that, they cannot enter it into evidence. That's how the law works. Anytime a piece of evidence is admitted into a court, there needs to be somebody there to confirm, be able to confirm what it is, especially when it comes to a drawing like that. I mean, obviously it depends on what the piece of evidence is, but in this case, because it was drawn by somebody, they have to be able to confirm that, yes, that is my drawing. That is what I drew. That's the main basis. Sorry. That's the way it works. June Chandler, she did testify, and she put herself in breach of her settlement by doing so. Now, I don't know if there was any outcome of that. I don't know if the Jacksons went after her privately. I'm not sure. But the settlement that the Chandlers signed was that they could not talk. That was the whole settlement, that they could never talk about the case anymore and they could not testify. That's why they didn't go to criminal court. The state knew that if the Chandlers were to be called, it would put them in breach of that settlement and they would have to work it out through negotiations. That was also part of the settlement, that if either one of them had gone against that settlement, that they would have to go into arbitration. There was a whole issue that happened with the Diane Sawyer interview where Michael Jackson tried claiming they never found anything. They never found nothing to connect me. Essentially, he was calling Jordan Chandler a liar. Evan Chandler ended up suing again, and he sued the network. He sued, who else did he sue? I'm trying to remember, but he sued the network. He sued Michael Jackson. He sued Priscilla Presley because they were married at the time. She got dropped from the lawsuit immediately, and then the network got dropped from the lawsuit. Per the terms of the settlement, they went into arbitration. Nobody knows the outcome of that arbitration, but suffice it to say, it's possible that he won some more money. Okay, so the next one. It has to do with Scott Ross, and he says that James Safechuck was a non-entity and he was not needed to testify, and that Michael would never have called him to testify. Absolutely ridiculous. James was one of the suspected abuse victims that was mentioned in the court reports. To suggest that he was a non-entity is ridiculous. And Scott Ross has no idea what he's talking about, number one. And I have some stuff on this too that you'll be able to look at on my blog. Again, this is a he said situation. Scott Ross has no way of knowing whether Michael called James Safechuck or not. His mother says he called. James says he called. They have no reason to lie about that. They have no reason to lie about Michael calling them. So no, I don't believe Scott Ross. Sorry. The next question, number 11, is why would Wacko want his victims to testify on trial when so many attorneys could have broken them? Okay, so this is sort of a psychological question that has to do with victims of abuse and their abusers. Often abusers will have a control over their victims for a long amount of time. As I've said, it can take as many as 20 years for some victims to come forward. And I should note that with male victims, many times they never come forward. But when they do, they're telling the truth. And that's not my opinion. That's the opinion of the FBI. That's the opinion of authorities who work in sexual crime cases. It is very difficult for boys to come forward and to admit everything that has happened. As far as testifying and getting someone to testify, this is not the first time that a victim has testified in defense for their abuser. Victims will often deny, and he hadn't come out, okay? He hadn't told anybody about what happened. So why would Jackson even feel worried about that? He had trained them since day one. This is a secret. This is a secret. Don't tell anyone. The world is ignorant. We can't tell anyone. You'll go to jail. I'll go to jail. He had been beating this into their heads the same way he beat the message into all of the fans' heads. I'm just a child. I'm Peter Pan. I didn't have a childhood. Over and over and over. And his fans repeat this. Okay? He says it all the time. Every interview you see him in, he's talking about the children. He's talking about this. He's talking about how everyone's after him for money. And he's talking about being a victim. Poor me. Poor me. Everyone's after me. This was his mentality. And he beat those messages into all of our heads. Every single one of us knows those lines. And he did the same to his victims. So of course they're not going to say anything. And to sit here and say that an attorney is going to break Wade? Are you kidding me? He hadn't told his parents, or well, his mother. He hadn't told his siblings. He hadn't told his friends. He hadn't told his own wife. And you think an attorney's going to break him? Forget it. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. They learn how to lie and no one's going to break them. It's a stupid argument and it's very myopic when it comes to the topic of child sexual abuse. If you're not aware of the power that abusers have over their victims, well, then you just don't know anything about child sexual abuse. And trust me, I'm not an expert. I understand these things. It doesn't take much to understand. It really, really doesn't. Okay, the next one. Number 12, how did Wade... Oh, wait, I already did that. We already went into that. I'm sorry. Yeah, number 12 is how did Wade pass the attorneys in cross-examination? I just kind of covered that. I apologize. I kind of morphed those two together. But again, stupid question. Number 13, 1.5 billion reasons. Okay, well, listen. I don't know where this number comes from, honestly. I must have missed something in my reading, which is possible. Okay, I don't know where this comes from. The civil court will decide what damages, if it goes to a trial, if it goes to a jury. The jury will decide what the damages are and they award accordingly. I hope that they do have an opportunity to go to court. I hope that they win and I hope that they're awarded a whole lot of money. I hope that they're awarded every last dime of the Jackson estate, if you really want to know the truth. It is past the statute of limitations. I don't know how likely it will be for them to succeed at this lawsuit. It's going to be very, very, very difficult for them. However, they made it very clear that they want to go on record. It was the only way Wade could get the estate to listen to him and to listen to what he had to say. And James shared that as well, that same mentality. And Wade, I can only imagine how this guy feels because he got on the stand in 2005. He essentially called that little boy, Gavin, a liar, is what he did. And I can't imagine how humiliating it would be to come out after all these years and admit that he was the reason or part of the reason why that little boy did not receive any justice for the abuse that he endured. That's not something that people want to admit, but he wants to go on record. And by them doing this, the next victim that comes out may not happen, but if they do, they're going to have record of what James and Wade said. And let me also remind the fans out there that if they had not gone to court, they had not filed a lawsuit, the fans instead would be saying, well, if I were abused, I'd go to court, I'd sue. They just don't want to go on record with their story because they're liars. They can't win with fans. They can't win with people who refuse to see what's so obvious. So this idea that you're going to attack them for going to court, that's how we settle things in this country. That's how we put things on record. That's the way it's done, and that's the way they're doing it. If they hadn't done it, you'd still be complaining. So don't act like it matters, because it doesn't. If you're one of the blind people, you're going to make an excuse for anything. You're going to blame them for anything. So stop acting like it's a big deal. And why are you so worried about it? I thought y'all said Michael was innocent. You seem a little worried that they're going to get their hands on some money. That's all I'm going to say. The Jacksons especially. The next one, number 14, is Wade filed his motion under seal. I will provide some information on this on my blog as well, but this is not exactly true. What happened happened is there were parts of the testimony, as it were, his testimony concerning the abuse that he wanted to keep sealed. But the actual record of the motion and everything, that's public. All of that is public. But yes, some parts of what they've said, and I think James is the same way, I think some of his stuff is sealed. So there's a lot of things that the public does not know. I would imagine that there's a lot of things you'd want to keep sealed, especially when it has to do with your sexual abuse as a child. I mean, when I watched the documentary, I could tell both of them were holding back a lot. I could tell. Victims tend to minimize what has happened to them, but I'm guessing that a lot more information was told to the court because he wanted to give a better, clearer picture of what had happened. That's not something he's going to want everybody to know about. Victims do not like exposing themselves to that degree. It's very difficult for them to talk about in the first place, but they do have to tell the court the entire story. They don't have to tell the public everything. Some people just feel entitled to every little thing. It's ridiculous. The wedding ring. Okay, this is number 15. They're saying that James's wedding ring, this whole story comes from a book by Victor Gutierrez, and he stole this story from the book. Okay, nobody's read this book. I don't know anybody that's read this book. It's been around for years, but it's hard to get your hands on. I think it's pretty expensive too. It's supposed to be some stuff put together by Evan Chandler's notes or something. I really don't know anything about this book. I am 1,000% positive that James never read this book. It wouldn't make any sense that he would. I don't even know how to address this point because the problem is most fans have never read the book either. So how do you know exactly what the book says if you've never read it? And I've never read it. I don't know what there is to address here. Can we just not talk about a book that no one ever read? Is that too much to ask? Number 16, there's a part where they criticize James for keeping the rings. Michael Jackson gave him some rings, some jewelry, but then they turn around and criticize him for getting rid of other things, like other memorabilia that was sold or burned or whatever. Okay, so James could have kept these rings and put them somewhere and forgot about them and then found them one day and remembered them. That's always a possibility. Maybe James wanted to just keep them because it was a special time in his life. Again, part of the reason why child sexual abuse victims have such a hard time admitting what has happened to them is the realization that their entire childhood was a lie. That is not something easy to do. And so when they're looking back at some of these memories, they want them to be fond because they did feel happy and good when it was happening. It's very difficult to deal with that, and everybody is very different when it comes to memorabilia. I still have my first love letter. I know exactly where it's at. Okay, I won't lie. I'm very sentimental about that stuff. I have love letters from boyfriends that are long gone, and I know I should get rid of them, but I haven't. Confession. Hopefully none of them are listening to this because I'd be embarrassed. Look, I'm just sentimental. I keep a lot of that stuff. It is what it is. But there are other people that are totally the opposite. Like, I'm broke up with you, I'm burning everything you gave me. Okay, I've seen those people before too. I wish I was a little bit more like that. There have been some things I've gotten rid of. Don't get me wrong. I don't keep everything. My point is, everybody's different in that regard. It is not fair to criticize him for what he kept or what he got rid of or anything like that. That's ridiculous. It's just cruel. I understand that maybe someone could look at that and they don't understand it, but that's probably just the way that person is. And somebody could look at me and think I'm crazy, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. Everybody's different that way. I don't think this is a valid criticism. I'm sorry. I think it's just a lot of nitpicking. And again, whether you think what he's done is right or wrong, that doesn't take away the fact that he was abused. It doesn't take away the fact that he was abused. Okay, Culkin's testimony. Macaulay Culkin, number 17. He says nothing happened. Well, anyone with a brain knows he is lying. Okay, I've watched videos of Macaulay Culkin, and in every interview, he says the same thing. He's trained. This is the same thing what I was talking about before with Michael Jackson, how he beats these messages into people's heads. I don't have a childhood. Everybody's after me. Everybody wants money. I'm a victim. Macaulay Culkin. Nothing that never really happened. No, I mean, we just slept in the bed. You gotta remember, Michael's bedroom is like 2 stories, okay? It's like so big, okay? Nothing happened, okay? It's totally fine. It's totally normal. I mean, I totally related to Michael because I'm like really famous, and like I just saw him as, just an average guy, and I think that's why we bonded so well. Every single interview, never once does he give a credible, no, Michael Jackson did not molest me, period. That's a credible denial. Never once does he do that. Instead, he starts going on about a diatribe about the size of Michael Jackson's room and how he and Michael were both famous and he only saw Michael as an equal. He never really thought of him as some big god, and that's why they got along so well. It's scripted. It's rehearsed. He said it so many times. He says the same thing over and over again. It's this conditioning that Michael Jackson has done with all of his victims. They all end up saying the same thing. Go back and look at Wade's video when he was a kid. Look at his denial. He closes his eyes. He doesn't have any expression on his face. He's terrified. He looks like a deer in headlights. Do you think investigators thought he was telling him the truth? No, they knew. Now, and I don't want to criticize Macaulay Culkin because I don't blame him, okay? He has a right to stay silent, and it sucks that they lied to protect their abuser. But the biggest issue here is the made witness activity between Jackson and Macaulay Culkin. And Macaulay Culkin admitted that he did sleep in the bed together with Michael Jackson alone. There's no arguing that. And I do pray that Macaulay Culkin can come out one day, but listen, he's tied to that family as godfather of all 3 of his kids, of Jackson's kids. That's going to be a real hard one. That really ties you. Michael Jackson, he knew how to shut people up, and that's one way to do it. Keep people real close so you can have control over them. If he never does, he never does. And I do not judge that. That's his deal. Again, male victims, oftentimes they don't come forward. Number 18, the interview with James Safechuck was edited. Jackson didn't just say the best part about Hawaii was being with James, but also with his family. Okay, I think there's a transcript of this. I have not been able to find the full version of the interview that's actually on tape. This might be a point of contention. I'll go ahead and give you that it was edited. He said, I like being with James Safechuck and I like being with your family. Okay, fair enough. Still doesn't take away the fact that he said something like that to make the child feel good, to make the child feel comfortable. It is part of grooming. It doesn't take away the fact that Michael Jackson molested James. It doesn't change that. Number 19, other countries are cutting out parts of Neverland because the fans are debunking all the lies. They're a liar. In the UK, they filmed Leaving Neverland over the course of 2 days. So it was 2 hours one night, 2 hours the next night. But yes, advertisements are added, and so it cuts out some of the film. So it's about 15 minutes for every hour of film. I mean, I don't know how their ads exactly work, but that's what it is in America. If you're watching an hour program, it's actually about 40 to 45 minutes. So yeah, that cuts out some time. But all of those cuts are done prior to them airing. They already have a TV version of the documentary. Okay, this is all done in production, in post-production, I should say. So obviously Channel 4 wanted to show the documentary. They say, we need this much footage, okay? And the editors go in and they cut out any superfluous parts to satisfy the needs of the network so the network can then show the documentary. This is done way before anybody even watched the documentary to be going around and doing this supposed debunking that never occurred. And so far, fans have not debunked crap. The only thing they've done is proven that they've never studied any of these cases before. That's all they've done. Number 20. James's ring still fits. No, it doesn't. Another outrageous lie. He puts the ring on the top of his finger. That's it. End of story. Lie. Okay, and finally we get to the last one, which is this train station. James says during the documentary he was abused, and one of the places he claims was inside the train station in the upper level. Now, it does appear as though there was indeed a train station at Neverland Ranch during this time, but it doesn't appear that this would be the same train station that was featured in the photos. And I've kind of heard from both sides on this, and I know some people are kind of trying to make this fit. The only thing we do know is that James was there before and after this new train station was built at Neverland Ranch. It's highly likely that the abuse that he experienced probably did go on a little bit longer than he had initially remembered. This is not uncommon. He could have very well been thinking about another place, but somehow he transferred it onto the train station. These types of memory problems that happen are very common among abuse victims, and especially when we're talking about something that happened 30 years ago. Ultimately, I don't believe that it was a lie. I don't believe that it's anything that can't be explained away. We still don't have an official statement from James explaining why this discrepancy might be there. There could very well be more to the story that he hasn't said. So I'm going to wait for that rather than sit here and nitpick and figure out whether he's lying or not. He has no reason to lie about this abuse. Nobody can say one way or the other. Ultimately, we can look at both of these two victims. We know, number one, that authorities always suspected that they were abuse victims. Number two, they have similar stories, similar patterns to what Michael Jackson was doing before. And number three, we also know that male victims generally do not lie about this type of stuff. And that is not my opinion, the opinion of professionals, the opinion of people who work at the FBI, who work in law enforcement, who deal with sexual abuse. Those are the facts. Those are the statistics. I'm sure I will be back with more because there's a lot of stuff I couldn't get to. I mean, there's just so many lies and so many distortions. I think the most important thing to really focus on is Michael Jackson himself. Look at the man. Look at his patterns. Look at who he was. He also just so happens to fit the profile of a pedophile. That is not a coincidence. Michael Jackson is not all that special. He was a human just like anybody else. The rules of psychology apply to Michael Jackson as they do with everybody else. Just because he was famous, just because he didn't have a childhood, that does not exonerate him from basic human psychology. And I'll be back.